Hi, friends. I'm Janet Braden, and I am a GT instructional coach for Knox County Schools.
My name is Tiffany Nicely, and I am also a GT coach for Knox County Schools.
So today we are going to use art to guide and push ourselves to think more deeply.
Now, if you're a KCS student, this video lesson actually goes along with your enrichment resource for this week. You can find that resource on the KCS at Home website under the Gifted and Talented section. If you do not have access to that resource, don't worry. You can still participate in this lesson and keep listening. Okay, so we're looking into this lesson as we learn to think more deeply. We're going to be discussing symbolism. Now, what is symbolism? It's when a picture, object, or color is used to represent another idea or concept.
Artists and authors rely on the figurative meaning of symbols to help convey their message to their audience. We have things in our lives that are symbolic that we may not even notice are actually symbols. Think about pictures, objects, and certain colors you have around your home that represent you and your family.
Now, today we're going to be going through these 4 steps that you see here outlined. Now, in step 1, we're going to be using a famous artist's self-portrait to think deeply about how she uses symbolism to represent meaningful parts to her life. Then we're going to apply what we've learned in step 2. There we will be doing an acrostic, and we will use the knowledge that we did in step 1 to complete the acrostic. We'll be sharing what we've created and model the thinking that we used in taking and explaining our chosen words.
We're then going to challenge you to create your own self-portrait that will include symbols that are meaningful to you and your family. You'll also create your own acrostic poem. Finally, we're going to show you where you can record a quick video to explain your self-portrait and your acrostic poem with the rest of us so that we can learn from each other.
All right, so first of all, we need you to understand that this is not an art lesson. However, we are going to integrate art within this lesson in order to help us learn about symbolism. Now, this is a self-portrait, which means that the artist drew this picture of herself. So at first look, notice that this portrait includes symbols that represent another idea or concept. Her symbols include her use of objects and color. Each of these objects holds meaning. Study this for a moment. If you're able, pause your video here and make a quick note of all the things that you see. Mrs. Braden, when you look at this, what do you see?
Okay, so the first thing I see when I see this picture is I see a woman who is not smiling. She's standing in front of really big leaves and she has dragonflies above her and butterflies flying above her, and the butterflies are in her hair. She also has a monkey on one of her shoulders and a black cat on the other. And then I notice that she has thorns around her with a bird hanging from the center of it.
Well, to better understand her self-portrait, we have to understand and have a little bit of background about this artist. Frida Kahlo is a famous artist, and she experienced several hardships in her life, including contracting polio as a child and being in a terrible bus accident. Both of these caused her to live her adult life in much physical pain. She was often confined to her bed. She painted from her bed as a way to fight boredom. In her self-portrait, she included symbols that represented her life and her Mexican culture. Now, remember those symbols that Mrs. Braden noticed on our previous slide? Well, now we want to know a little bit more. Now that we know a little bit more about this artist, we're going to talk through each of those symbols and think more deeply about the meaning behind each one. Now, Mrs. Braden does have some additional background knowledge of this artist. She's going to be sharing that knowledge as we discuss. Now, as we walk through our thinking, please understand that what we're sharing took much more time than what we're discussing in this video today. This is the result of that thinking. So when we did try to determine the meaning behind the symbols our artist used, what were your thoughts, Miss Braden?
So, like you said, I did a lot of research on Frida Kahlo, and I used that research to help me interpret the symbols. I learned that Frida Kahlo was born and raised in Mexico, and her culture was very, very important to her. So a lot of the symbols that we see in her picture are representative of her culture. So I see with the monkey, and the monkey represents a gift from her husband. So I think the monkey is indicative of her husband and her love for her husband.
Okay, so why do you think the artist included a black cat in this picture?
Well, I also thought it was a black cat when I first looked at it, but I, through research, found out that it's actually a panther. And panthers are representations of bad luck in Mexican folklore. So I'm thinking the panther symbolizes the fact that she had polio as a child and was in a horrible bus accident.
Okay. So what do you think the artist wanted to communicate by including a hummingbird hanging from her neck?
So hummingbirds are symbols of good luck and strength. And I think she used the hummingbird to show how strong she was because she had to overcome so much pain from her bus accident. And she also walked with a limp from having polio as a child. So I think the hummingbird shows the viewer that she has a lot of strength and she's a strong woman.
Well, at first look, did you notice what's on top of her head? Is that her hair maybe made up into an elaborate braid, or is that a hair covering that she's put on top of her head? What do you think it means, or what do you think about the shape of it?
So when I first noticed it, I did notice that she had the butterflies in her hair, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention. And then this is where studying and taking your time and looking at pictures pays off. I noticed that she has an infinity symbol on top of her head. And so I wonder if that is to represent her art and that her art will live forever. I also noticed that it is a different color than the rest of her hair. So I think by using the infinity symbol and different colors, that it is to have that her art is to stand out.
Do you see evidence of some sort of change or transformation in this artwork? Like, what do you think her use of coloring or shading? It appears that the top of her portrait is a lot lighter than the bottom of her portrait.
Yeah, so I think she had the color get darker as she got older in her life and her life became harder. Like we said before, she was in a terrible bus accident that left her in pain all of her life. So I think the coloring at the top represents her childhood, and as it goes down, it represents more of her life as it got harder for her.
Right. Well, I remember you talking about her surrounded with all these leaves behind her. So what role do you think the leaves play in this self-portrait?
Yeah, so again, like we've said, Mexico was very important to her. And I think the leaves represent the dense jungle foliage of Mexico. And so that's a sign of, again, a sign of how important Mexico was to her.
Okay. And finally, one more question. How do you think those thorns contribute to the central theme or overall idea of what she's trying to portray in this artwork?
I think they represent the hardships that she had to go through and the pain that she had to go through. Her life was not easy.
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention here, though, is you've listened to us think back and forth and you've heard Mrs. Braden's thinking that often our thoughts can be interpreted and what we see in artwork can be shown in many different ways. So neither one of us are art teachers. Therefore, what we interpret about these symbols, it's going to be based on our background and what we're capable of researching in trying to learn more about this artist. Someone that's had more training, like an art teacher or an art expert, they could offer other interpretations about this artwork that might be completely different than what you've heard here today. In this case, when I was doing my research, I found something different that than Mrs. Braden did. And it has to do with the hummingbird. Oftentimes you see pictures of hummingbirds and they're very quick moving birds and they're flittering and fluttering around. They're very colorful and they're often flying above flowers, moving from flower to flower throughout their day. And so there's a good theory behind that this hummingbird being lifeless and hanging and not moving and being black could reference that she does not feel like she is full of life and able to move around a lot since she is confined to her bed. So that's just one more idea for how art can be interpreted differently. Now, we're going to take this a step further and extend our thinking through doing an acrostic. Now, an acrostic is an alternative learning task. It promotes conceptual thinking. And in this case, an acrostic is going to help us apply what we've learned about the symbols Frida Kahlo used in her self-portrait.
Each line of an acrostic can be completed as a single word response, a list of several words, a phrase, or a complete sentence. Later in this lesson, you'll be asked to complete one at a level that challenges you the most. In our example we're getting ready to share with you, we will be showing you an acrostic completed with one or more single word responses. So if you're a third grader, that's a great place for you to start. If you're a fourth or fifth grader, we challenge you to do appropriate words and phrases and try even complete sentences.
Okay. Now, when we're sharing our thinking with you, I want you to pay close attention to our process. It's going to help you to create a more detailed self-portrait that will include symbols that are meaningful in your life. Now, in thinking of the words to use that represent our artist's self-portrait, you might need to use a thesaurus to help you if you're having difficulty in coming up with just the right words. Since our lesson's focus is on symbolism, that's going to be our acrostic, and it should also be yours when it's your turn. Notice how the word symbolism is down the left-hand side of your screen. It contains 2 S's and 2 M's. So we'll focus on the double letters first. Knowing what you've learned from the self-portrait and the research you did on this artist, what would be exceptional S words that would be represented here, Ms. Braden?
So for the S, I chose strength. It seemed just to come naturally. She definitely had hurdles that she had to overcome. I also, like I said, when I first noticed the picture, that she was not moving, that she was silent. And I think silence is because she lets her art speak for her. For the second S, I used stamina. And I think that's because she was tough and she had to have a lot of stamina in her life to get through her pain. And then I also, so stamina.
Okay. So also too, what words did you think about when you were thinking about the letter M to describe her mindset or her feelings, and giving us the best vocabulary that would go with those?
I simply use the word mad. I imagine that if I had to live a life full of pain, I would be pretty upset by it. I also used and pushed myself a bit on this and used morose and macabre because of the symbols of bad luck in the picture, and she does not look happy in the picture.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the rest of the letters are only used one time. So starting at the top, walk us through your thinking of how you determine the best words for each of those.
Okay, so Y is hard. Yearning is what I chose for Y, and I think she yearned for happiness because she never was really happy. Then for B, I chose bold and brave because she had to fight through her pain to become successful. And for O, through my research, I found that she felt different than other people, so I used the word odd. And I think that she struggled with feeling different with other people. I used lethargic because her pain exhausted her. And so that's just another word for, being exhausted. And then I also chose lonely because she was by herself so much. And I chose intelligent because I think she was really smart. And I think that the detail and the work in her art shows great intelligence. And then I also chose ill because even after she had that bus accident, she continued to have more and more surgeries. And eventually she ended up dying from the bus accident years later from all the pain and uh, struggles that she had from that.
Outstanding. I love how you shared your thinking through each one of those words. Now it's going to be your turn, boys and girls, and we're going to ask you to create a self-portrait and make sure that it has within that portrait symbolism that is meaningful to you. Then you will also create an acrostic with the word symbolism, and you're going to connect the words to your portrait so that you're expressing your meaningful content through that acrostic.
So before you start, you're going to need a few things. First, everything in your picture should have meaning, and I want you to think about that and go through and spend some time thinking about the things in your life that are significant and important to you. And then you need to do some thinking, and you should be able to explain why you have each object in your picture and think about how you use color. Go back to Frida Kahlo's picture where she used so much color, we think, to represent the different phases of her life and how the picture is going to be used and how the color helps with that. Then lastly, in your acrostic, each letter of your acrostic must show a connection between your thinking and those symbols. And this might challenge you a little bit, but it gives you a chance to explain through the acrostic why you chose those items.
Okay. And so when you're doing this, boys and girls, this might be a good place. If you are on a computer, this is a great place that you would want to freeze your video so that you can hold on to these questions and think about them as you make a plan to create your self-portrait. You have to remember that you need to think about this a little bit so that you can choose just the right objects or color that will be symbolic of the most meaningful things in your life. And you want to make sure you don't forget something that is really important to you. So much like you would plan a rough draft if you were going to write a paper, you want to create a plan, sketch it out on paper, make some quick notes for yourself. What is it that you want to put into your portrait? Plan on where you think they should go within your portrait before you actually start trying to draw it.
So Miss Nicely and I came up with a few questions to help guide your thinking. So what you might want to consider is what view of your face are you going to show? Are you going to be front on, or are you going to be a profile to the side? Are you going to have your whole face? Are you going to cover parts of it? And what parts might you cover? Are your eyes going to be open, or are they going to be closed or looking away? Think back in Frida Kahlo's picture, she was looking straight at the viewer. Also, what are you going to be wearing? Our clothing is a big symbol of who we are and what we wear. So think about that and how you're going to be dressed in your picture. Also, think about where are you going to be? What's your environment? Are you going to be imagined in your imagination? Will it be real, like a place in your house? Is it going to be inside or outside? Really pay attention to the environment that you're going to surround yourself in this picture. Also, what's going to be in your picture? Are you going to have your whole body? Are you going to use your hands or your feet instead of just your face? And also think about the important people in your life. Is there going to be anybody else in that artwork with you? And then also think about the mood that you're going to create. Think back to Frida Kahlo's picture where she definitely created a mood in that. And again, also the colors that you use are going to be very important. So think about those colors. You might want to use some of your favorite colors for things that are very important to you. Okay, so here's my self-portrait. And I made this using symbols that are very important to me. And I'm pretty sure that my symbols are a lot easier to decipher than Frida Kahlo's. And I also want to point out to you that clearly I'm not an artist, but I also chose things that were very important. And I took a lot of time when I did this. So this took me quite a bit of time because I had to think through and I had to make a list. And then I had to think about where I put each thing in my picture. So let's go through on why I chose these things. Okay, so what you have here is S. And so S is for see the world because I love to travel. So I have a globe and a suitcase. And why I have the globe? Because one of my goals in life is to go to every continent in the world. I then chose Y. And like I said with the Frida Kahlo acrostic, Y was hard and I had to struggle. And I struggled with Y for a little while. But I came down to the phrase, you're never alone when you have friends and family. And the reason I chose that is that everything in this picture are things that I do with my friends and my family. And I wanted that to show how important they are to me. Lastly, or not lastly, next I have mountains and music, because music is a big part of my life. And the mountains, especially the Smokies, are just my favorite place to go. I also then chose books, which you have right underneath the mountains over there, because I like to read as much as I possibly can. The O is for Old Dominion, and that's because I'm from Virginia, and Old Dominion is the nickname for Virginia. And it's where I grew up, and it's very much part of my home. And then I used L, and L is symbolized for my love of learning, and that's with the Power T, because I went to UT, and the diploma cap, because for learning. And then the apple is for I, because I am a teacher, and being a teacher is very important to me, and it is a big part of who I am. I then chose swimming, because swimming is something that I did as a child, and it relaxed me, and it's something that as an adult I still love to do, and it still relaxes me so much. The table represents the M, and that is the more the merrier. And I love to entertain, and I love to cook, and I love to be around friends, and I'm somebody who always says everybody should come. So those are my acrostics. I also want to point out to you that I didn't have to put every single thing in my picture into my acrostic. So don't put that pressure onto yourself.
Okay, one more thing I want to point out before we get off Miss Braden's acrostic is I want you to notice how different it is from the one we did for Frida Kahlo. For Frida Kahlo, we used one-word answers. We used descriptive adjectives to describe her: ill, intelligent, strength, stamina. Here, Miss Braden used a different version of the acrostic where she took the opportunity to include phrases and some sentences in hers. So that's just going to show you some of the variety that you may be able to do when you try this yourself. Now, Mrs. Nicely made her acrostic here, and I'm going to share that with you. I was more literal with mine and tried to make mine much like Frida Kahlo did, where she was the central part of her self-portrait. So I tried to do that with myself. And so you see me holding my dog Gizmo. And I chose S for spiritual. I have a very strong faith in my life, and that was shown by the cross that you see there, and also the rays reaching up to heaven. For Y, I chose the word yardage because I was a competitive swimmer for a number of years growing up, from the time that I was very young. And then my 3 children are also competitive swimmers. So I have spent a huge amount of my time in that sport. And my coach used to always say, we're going to put in some yardage today. And that meant we were going to swim a lot of laps in a pool measured in yards. It was as simple as that. But yardage now can refer to the fact that I've just experienced a lot. So I've got a lot of yardage in my marriage. I have a lot of yardage in my teaching career. I have a lot of yardage in the pool. And so I thought that that was a great word overall for me. For mother, I put mother with the exponent 3 beside it because I have 3 kids and they're very important in my life. And they're represented in my self-portrait by the doctor symbol down there at the bottom, and because my oldest son is going to medical school, and then the laughter symbol because my youngest son keeps us all in stitches, and he's very, very funny. And then my daughter is represented by the apple, which is, she's going into education. She's in college right now. And so she's going to follow in her mom's footsteps and be a teacher. For B, I chose breaks, and that is represented in the portrait by the 2 breaks in my heart. And that represents the death of my mother and the death of an unborn child in my life. I did choose the word breaks rather than broken because despite these hard times in my life, I still try to choose joy and not let that stop me from finding that joy. For O, I chose obstinate because I'm very headstrong. And when I put my mind on something and set goals for myself, there aren't a lot of things that will stop me from reaching that goal. And so you can see that in the portrait where I repeated the lines again and again and again. And that's sort of like, I will do something again and again to try to get it right. I can be very obstinate. L is for loud because anyone that spends any amount of time with me knows that about me. And they will learn that very quickly about me, that I'm so loud. I is for intellectual because of my love for books and learning. And I also love to teach others and help them learn. So I'm just constantly learning new things, whether I'm in formal school or not. I'm always learning something new, and I never quit learning. S is for strong. Even there are times in my life that even though I don't feel strong, a lot of other people describe me as being strong, with a strong inner faith, and then also strong on the outside because I am pretty stubborn about getting my exercise in. So I like to think that I'm strong physically as well. And finally, M is for matrimony because my marriage to my husband is very important to me. And I have spent more of my life married than not married. And so, and also it's on the front of my mind because my oldest son is getting married next month. So there you go. There's my self-portrait.
That's awesome.
So now we're going to give you the opportunity to share your own self-portraits. And you can do this after you've created your acrostic and created your self-portrait. You can go to a program called Flipgrid. You can do this on a smartphone. You can download the app to the smartphone if you have your parents' permission, or you can access this on a computer if you go to flipgrid.com. If you do /GT self-portrait, then you will be able to hit the green plus sign and record your own video to help explain your acrostic and share it with the rest of us. Be certain before you do this, you talk to your parents at your house because it will require you to have a Google account.
So you also should know that you have to be approved before your video uploads. So Miss Nicely and I will both be approving these. So there will also be a delay between the time that you post it so that we can go through and preview these and make sure that they are appropriate. If you are sharing something that is not related to your self-portrait or your acrostic, it will not be included. And we ask that you stay on topic with the self-portrait and symbolism with this.
All right, so if you have any comments or concerns, boys and girls, that is our lesson for today. We thank you for your time and attention. I want you to notice down at the bottom of the screen, I want you to email us if you need any help in trying to share this on Flipgrid or if you have any questions about what we've shared with you today. Thank you so much.
Bye, thank you.